you and thank you for being here today to support Wilbur. I know that means so much to him, and just great to see your faces out there. I'm going to start off by presenting Wilbur with his coin that symbolizes 44 years of sobriety. And this was given to Wilbur by Chef Aaron Brooks. And just pass it around. You can pass it around and take a look at it.
That's nice, Fairly.
Yes. Just hold on to it and just pass it down the crowd.
Bless my coin for me, folks.
Alright, and then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wilbur so he can share his journey.
Well, folks, thanks for being here.
Wouldn't miss it.
I have a certain friend who thinks he has a sense of humor presented me with this just before I came in here, and this, if you can see this.
What did it say, Wilbur?
Well, my story is not that much different from all other stories of men like me that had a similar journey. My upbringing, nothing outstanding or different about my upbringing. Grew up on a farm about 50 miles northwest of here, milking cows by hand. Nothing remarkable about my childhood except that I was very timid, very shy, you know, kind of like now. Anyway, I really was timid and shy and fearful. I took my first drink when I was 15 years old. Some friends of the family took me on a trip to Springfield, and just as a joke, I guess, they gave me one can of beer. So I downed that can of beer, and I should have known then that I was going to be in trouble. Tops of my ears started tingling. I felt myself blushing. But the really important thing was this shy, introverted kid who had these people laughing at him didn't mind being laughed at. He was having fun. So, you know, it really, I thought, I have discovered the secret of life. So, didn't drink again until I went in the Army. And even then, I wasn't a full-blown, well, I drank quite a bit, but it wasn't the problem that it became later. I would get my pay. They paid once a month. Of course, I didn't make that much money. And would drink up my pay, except for my other stuff, of course. Pretty much drink up my pay, and then I would be okay for the next 3 weeks until the next payday. I mean, I didn't have to borrow 4 for $5 or anything like that. I was no longer in that kind of desperate shape. But some of my activities when I was drinking kind of impressed the hierarchy above me in the wrong way. I spent that time in the Army, 3 years of which was in Germany. I served with Elvis. I always used to, when I became a tour bus driver, after I got sober and got a job driving, when these little old ladies, I'd take groups of them to Branson, I always mentioned that I served with Elvis, and they were impressed. So I was talking about name dropping. But anyway, my Army service was kind of uneventful. I got promoted to corporal 4 times, never getting any higher. And So anyway, I got out of the Army and kind of knocked around various places, went out to Farmington, New Mexico, where I helped build a motel, I remember. Just going off on a lark, going wherever I pleased, taking whatever jobs looked like they would keep me alive and were kind of fun. And drinking was still a periodic thing. I was a Saturday night drinker. I had not lost all control by that time. And I remember that other than myself, most of the employees were Navajo Indians from the reservation, most of these construction workers. And when I would drink with them on a Saturday night, I considered them a bunch of drunks, because they typically had problems with alcohol. I did not realize what was going to happen to me. Well, in 1959, I married a young lady who was British, who I had met in Europe, and who had slaved and saved and immigrated to the United States. Well, when I left that job in Farmington, New Mexico, on impulse, I drove to New Jersey, and I said to this young lady, I said, I'm leaving for Missouri this afternoon. Are you coming with me or not? And I guess she kind of liked me a little bit because she came with me. So we got married, and I lived and worked in Kansas City for the next 2 years. My mouth is dry. I must be scared. But I really had no real sense of direction. I got a job, but it was kind of a, basic job. And then I got another job, which is kind of a dead-end basic job, which ain't no way for a married person to live. And it seemed like I wasn't going anywhere. So when the Air Force approached me with a promise to train me as an electronics technician, I grabbed onto it. Went to Keesler Air Force Base for about 10 months. Got trained as an electronics technician. Was the honor graduate of my class. Things seemed pretty good. And this poor woman that I married, who had spent years saving to come to the United States, my very first posting out of tech school was back to London, England. She wasn't real happy about that. So, I guess I was a good worker. They said I was anyway. But my drinking got progressively worse. Well, I'll just say this. I was promoted to Airman First Class in record time. I was promoted to Staff Sergeant in record time. Waited 5 years for Tech Sergeant, and by that time I really had become unpromotable. So I never got any higher than that. And moving on, in 1970, I had gotten bad enough that I just admitted I had a drinking problem, so they shipped me back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for treatment. And that went okay. Also, in conjunction with that, I went to my father's funeral, and I took my mid-tour leave, so out of 12 months in Korea, I only was in Korea about 8 months. And that's when I really began to seriously, I'm not going to make it long drunken or anything, because one thing, it's not that interesting. But in 1970, I really wanted to stop drinking. I began to really make effort to stop drinking. The results of that over the next 9 years was I was sober once for 6 months, twice for 5 months, once for between 2 and 3 months, and there were various other shorter periods of not drinking. So that didn't work. Well, the thing was, I was always gonna pull myself up by my own bootstraps. And the agenda was something like this: okay, I'll go into treatment. That 9 years was kind of a dreary series of treatment centers, psychiatric wards, throwing myself on altars at church, been baptized 4 times. But I didn't stop drinking for any length of time. But my agenda was always this: okay, I'm gonna make a new beginning. I'm gonna turn over a new leaf. Okay, it went like this: 1, get my health back. 2, get a job. 3, get the girl. By that time, my marriage was kind of done for. 5, let me start over there. 1, get my health back. 2, get the job. 3, get the girl. 4, get the recognition that I thought I deserved. And it always failed. So that was my agenda. And every time I knew it's going to work this time, but it never did. And this is going to be briefer. This is going to be almost as brief as you hoped it would be. On December the 18th of when I got out of the service, when I retired from the service, I got a pretty good job, lost that. I continued to go downhill until I could not hold a job. I could still work, but I was a near derelict. The only reason that I wasn't literally homeless was that I had managed to cobble together 22 years of military service. So that kept me off the streets. But a $60 a month sleeping room with bathroom down the hall is not exactly high living. That's what I had come to. And I was doing casual labor. I was so deluded about myself, I carried a pager. So somebody wanted a feed mill swept out, or trees dug, or furniture moved, they'd page me, and then I'd go do whatever it was and wait for the next assignment. Now, in my mind, I was not a bum. I was an independent contractor of my own labor. Let's get this over with.
You're doing fine.
On December the 18th of 1979, I was 44 years old. And I was in treatment. I was the afternoon of the day following my going into treatment the previous night. I was dirty, I was unshaven, they knew how sick I was, they hadn't made me clean up. I was about 15 hours away from my last drink. I was jittery almost to the point of DTs. And I was thoroughly depressed. And then the miracle happened. A thought came into my head that I do not take credit for. And the thought was this: here you are, you're 44 years old, you've been fighting this battle for a long time, and you have always lost. And then the thought came, again, I don't believe I originated it: what if the rest of your life is just a continuation of what you've experienced up till now? Well, that didn't look real good. And then the thought, there isn't something different than, greater than anything that I've ever experienced before, up to this point in my life, I'm screwed, I'm doomed. And then there was a unspoken, there were no words to it, just attitude of wanting help, of prayer, if you will. No longer were there any thoughts of getting the job, getting the girl, getting recognition and so forth. That just wasn't there. All that was left was, words I've had to create to explain it, was simply, God, if there is a God, I just don't want to have to drink any more booze. That was 44 years, a little more than 44 years ago. So I got the help that I needed. I do believe that had it not been for divine intervention, I would either be dead or I'd be stumbling around here looking for enough aluminum to buy another drink. But that was the beginning of my journey in sobriety. And I won't go into all the details of it, but I experienced a process which is boiled down to its essential, simply means trust God, clean house, and help others. Basically, I'll go into it a little bit. I had to see that I was truly hopeless, that there was nothing that I could do to save myself. I had to become willing to believe that there was a God who would restore me to sanity. I had to choose that I'm going to commit to God. Whatever you've got, that's what I'm going to do. I had to take a detailed look at myself and look at the man that I actually was. And I had to do this on paper, and it was a matter of several weeks of going thoroughly inventorying myself and seeing the manner of man that I was, which wasn't pretty. Then I got to sit down with with a man, and before God to go through and in detail share my whole life. You know, some people have said, and I have thought, I'll take this secret with me to the grave. I have no secrets, because there is one person who knows everything about me, no matter how horrific or perverted it was. He knows. And that was a very, very liberating experience. But then it came time to clean up my messes. Time to go start knocking on doors. Had some interesting experiences there. There was this one man who had a reputation as a bar fighter. He had sobered up, but he was still very angry, still very aggressive. He hadn't gotten over that. I was afraid of him. I had to approach that man, and I was really fearful. I knew I was going to get hurt real bad. So I approached him and I said, Billy Joe, I owe you an amends. I feared you, I hated you, and I talked about you behind your back. This man, who I thought might very well kill me, burst into tears. Later, he told me, he said, you're the first person in my life that has ever apologized to me. And that's just one example. Made amends to my family. Well, it's just a process, cleaning up all my messes. And I'll tell you something, there was something miraculous about that. Because people that I hadn't seen for years, that I owed amends to, would pop up into my face and, and I'd have to face it. Anyway, I got the idea, I was drawing a military retirement. Well, after alimony, I had a little bit of money. So I could survive, I thought, without working, and I wanted to be a do-gooder. And, so I was thinking I wouldn't work. I told a real good friend of mine in the program, I said, Steve, it says here in the book that some of us are so situated that we can devote nearly all of our time to this work. He looked at me and open mouth wondered and said, Wilbur, get a job. So there I am. I'm walking down Walnut Street and I'm praying. God, Steve says I ought to get a job. And he's probably right, but I just really don't know how to go about it. About that time, this friend of mine, this lady friend of mine, not a girlfriend, but just a lady that I knew that I was friends with, came screeching to a screeching halt on Walnut Street and said, Wilbur, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm looking for a job. And she said, well, I'm getting ready to buy my father's business. But in the meantime, why don't you go over here to Harker Paint Company and apply there? So I did. My resume, fired from 2 out of my last 3 jobs. It was right there on paper. Treated for alcoholism. Well, the next morning, the next day, I had accidentally knocked my phone off the hook, so I was not available. Early in the morning, the following morning, the local supervisor and the head man, the number 2 man under Earl Scheib, they had moved their distribution, or in the process of moving their distribution facility from Cleveland, Ohio to Springfield, Missouri. And the number 2 man was in town to interview and what have you. But anyway, the guy under him called me and said, we've been trying to get a hold of you. When can you come in? So I went in. And was interviewed by the number 2 man of the whole international corporation, the number 2 man directly under Earl Scheib himself. And not only did he give me a job, he apologized for only having the job of an order picker available with the possibility of promotion, some promotion later on. Now, folks, there were 200 job applications for 6 jobs. Now, you know, out of 200 people, there were probably quite a few who looked better than me. But anyway, the blessing, the miracle, I was plucked from the trash heap of life. I was restored to usefulness. I became a productive, useful citizen. And I got the opportunity to have a successful marriage, my 5th marriage. She passed away in 2006. Made a host of friends, had the opportunity to watch others recover, and I got to be a part of that process of their recovery. And I've been here for not quite 3 years, and I've been delighted here. I just loved it here after a period of adjustment. I love God, I love my country, and I love my village. It don't get no better than that.
Well done, Wilbur.
Yes.
I've never seen that. Thank you. I'm gonna say.
How